To the outside world, Victoria was the epitome of success. The self-made CEO of Hale Innovations, she had built her empire from the ground up with an uncanny blend of ambition, intuition, and sheer willpower. Her accolades filled an entire wall of the penthouse, a collection of awards, magazine covers, and framed headlines that spoke of a woman who had defied the odds. Yet none of these trophies filled the hollow ache she carried within her. A quiet longing for the one thing money and power couldn't secure. Unwavering trust. Tonight, her life seemed to glisten with a perfection most could only dream of. Adrian, her husband of 10 years, was in the adjoining room, adjusting his cufflinks in front of a gilded mirror. His effortless charm and sharp wit had once captivated her, and together they were seen as the ultimate power couple. Adrian's career as an investment banker added a layer of prestige to their union, a complement to her own staggering achievements. "Ready for tonight?" Victoria asked, her voice soft yet commanding as she stepped into the room. Adrian turned, his reflection catching the warm glow of the designer lamp behind him. "Almost," he replied, offering a quick, dashing smile. "You know me. Can't rush perfection." She smiled back, though the gesture didn't quite reach her eyes. Something about his tone, his easy nonchalance, felt slightly off. It wasn't an outright lie, but Victoria had honed the ability to detect micro-expressions and subtle changes in demeanor, skills that had served her well in the boardroom. Her thoughts drifted back to the phone call from earlier that day. She had overheard Adrian on a hushed call, his voice curt and clipped. When she'd stepped into the room, he had quickly ended the conversation, slipping his phone into his pocket with practiced ease. "Work drama?" she had asked, casually, masking her unease. "Nothing worth mentioning," Adrian had replied, brushing past her to the kitchen. "Just a client being difficult." It was the kind of answer that might satisfy anyone else, but not Victoria. In her world, details mattered, and this detail refused to leave her mind. Was it truly just a client, or was it something more insidious? Now, as Adrian stepped into his perfectly tailored tuxedo, her instincts buzzed like a warning siren in the back of her mind. She told herself to let it go, to focus on the night ahead. Their 10th anniversary celebration was a milestone worth savoring, a glittering affair set to unfold at one of Manhattan's most exclusive venues. The guest lists read like a who's who of high society, captains of industry, influential politicians, and close family friends, all gathered to honor their seemingly unbreakable bond. But as Victoria watched Adrian fasten his cufflinks, she couldn't shake the creeping sense that her carefully constructed world was more fragile than she dared admit. In a life built on precision, one misplaced piece could bring everything crashing down. For now, she brushed aside her unease, slipping into her own gown, a masterpiece of couture that hugged her frame like it had been poured onto her. Tonight, she would play her part flawlessly. After all, Victoria Hale didn't just live a perfect life. She performed it. The anniversary celebration unfolded like a scene from a fairy tale. A cascade of glittering lights adorned the high ceilings of the exclusive venue, their soft radiance reflected in the crystal chandeliers. Guests mingled in designer finery, sipping champagne from flutes that sparkled as brightly as the conversations that filled the room. For Victoria Hale, this was her domain, a world where every detail was a testament to her success and the life she'd built. Yet tonight, she couldn't shake the feeling that the perfection she had worked so hard to achieve was slipping through her fingers. As the evening wore on, Victoria moved effortlessly through the crowd, her every gesture calculated to exude poise and confidence. She laughed at compliments about her achievements, graciously accepted toasts in her honor, and smiled warmly for the endless stream of photos. But beneath the polished exterior, her mind was churning. She found herself watching Adrian more closely than usual. It wasn't intentional, or so she told herself, but her gaze sought him out across the room again and again. At first, he seemed his usual charming self, engaging guests with ease. Yet, as Victoria observed him with her unerring eye for detail, she noticed subtle inconsistencies. The way his laughter didn't quite reach his eyes, the way he glanced at his watch a little too often, as though marking time. It was during her speech, a heartfelt reflection on their 10 years together, that she caught it. Standing at the podium, the room bathed in warm light, she noticed a fleeting exchange between Adrian and Claire, her business partner. The glance lasted no more than a second, but it spoke volumes. A flicker of tension, a shared awareness that seemed out of place. Claire's smile faltered for a moment, and Adrian quickly averted his gaze. Victoria felt her breath hitch, but recovered instantly, masking her unease with a well-rehearsed smile. The moment passed unnoticed by the crowd, but it stayed with her, burrowing into her thoughts like a splinter. Later, as the evening wound down, Victoria's suspicions deepened. She moved through the crowd with renewed purpose, paying attention to details she might have otherwise ignored. Adrian and Claire's interactions were polite but deliberate, too deliberate, she realized. Their proximity seemed orchestrated, their conversations rehearsed. When she finally approached them, the two stood in the corner of the room, their heads close together as they spoke in hushed tones. Victoria's arrival cut the conversation short, the tension between them almost palpable. "Everything all right?" she asked, her tone light but her gaze sharp. Adrian turned to her with his practiced charm. "Of course," he said smoothly, slipping an arm around her waist. "Just discussing business, you know how it is." Claire nodded, her smile tight. Adrian was just asking for some advice on a potential client. Victoria nodded as if satisfied, though her instincts screamed otherwise. She let the subject drop, but made a mental note of the exchange. It wasn't just her imagination. Something was amiss. As the party drew to a close, Victoria retreated to a quiet corner of the venue, her eyes scanning the crowd. She had built her life on an unshakable foundation of logic and strategy, and she knew better than to act impulsively. But tonight, a new resolve took root. Whatever secrets Adrian and Claire might be hiding, she would uncover them. The cracks in her perfect life were growing wider, and she had no intention of letting her empire collapse without a fight. In the days following the anniversary party, Victoria Hale slipped into detective mode, her instincts no longer allowing her to dismiss the growing unease that gnawed at her. As she sat in her sleek office overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the whispers of suspicion refused to fade. She knew that the only way forward was to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Adrian and Claire had betrayed her trust, or so her instincts warned. The certainty wasn't yet rooted in evidence, but Victoria knew better than to ignore the threads of a mystery. After all, she'd built her career on identifying patterns others overlooked. And now, those same skills were about to guide her through a different kind of battlefield. Victoria began her investigation quietly. She wanted no slip-ups, no indication that she suspected anything. Her late nights at the office became more than just strategy sessions for Hailed Innovations. They were opportunities to comb through confidential records. The advantage of being CEO meant she had unrestricted access to the company's digital backbone, and wasn't long before she found her first lead. Claire's emails. Her business partner had been in frequent contact with Adrian. More frequent than seemed necessary, given his investment banking career had no direct involvement with Hale Innovations. The emails were professional on the surface, but there was an unmistakable tone of familiarity that Victoria didn't like. Certain phrases, "Let's discuss this privately," and "I'll trust your discretion," set off alarm bells. Still, this wasn't enough. Victoria needed tangible proof, a smoking gun that would confirm her suspicions. She expanded her search, diving into financial records and transaction histories. Her forensic accountants, hired in secret, worked tirelessly to trace irregularities in the company's accounts. Victoria had told them only that they might be internal theft. She hadn't yet named Claire as a potential suspect. The results were chilling. Money had been siphoned from the company through shell accounts linked to a private entity, an entity with ties to Adrian's financial firm. The transactions were small enough to avoid immediate detection, but consistent enough to cause real damage over time. The amounts added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, all hidden behind layers of corporate deception. Then came the final piece of evidence that brought Victoria's world crashing down. Personal messages between Adrian and Claire, recovered from a cloud backup. The texts revealed far more than financial conspiracy. Their affair was laid bare, a tangle of betrayal that went beyond money. Adrian's words were intimate, full of promises and plans for a future that excluded Victoria entirely. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was devastatingly personal. Adrian and Claire's scheme was audacious in its scope. They intended not only to drain Hale Innovations of its resources, but to dismantle it entirely. They planned to leave Victoria ruined, financially and emotionally, while they built a new life together on the ashes of her empire. Victoria's heart hardened as she read through their correspondence. Her grief was eclipsed by a rising fury. For years, she had given Adrian the benefit of the doubt, trusted Claire as a colleague and confidant. But now she saw clearly. They had underestimated her, mistaking her grace for naivety. As she closed her laptop, her lips curved into a cold smile, they had made a grave miscalculation. If Adrian and Claire thought they could destroy her without consequence, they were about to learn otherwise. Her plan for retribution had already begun. Victoria Hale had spent her life mastering the art of control. She didn't believe in impulsive decisions, especially when it came to something as vital as vengeance. For days, she meticulously constructed a plan, her every move calculated with surgical precision. If Adrian and Claire thought she would crumble under the weight of their betrayal, they had gravely underestimated her resolve. The first step was to gather irrefutable evidence, more than what she'd already uncovered. She hired a team of elite forensic accountants to track the stolen funds, ensuring every transaction was documented in excruciating detail. Each financial breadcrumb led to a tangled web of shell corporations that Adrian and Claire had carefully woven to conceal their theft. It was impressive, she admitted, but not impenetrable. She compiled the findings into a damning portfolio, an arsenal she planned to deploy at the right moment. Victoria also enlisted the services of a private investigator. Her instructions were clear: follow Adrian, document his every move, and leave no detail unexplored. The investigator's report revealed what she already suspected. Adrian's affair with Claire was not only the glue of their criminal enterprise, but a mockery of the life they had built together. Adrian's indiscretions extended further than Claire, involving clandestine meetings with yet another woman. That revelation only fueled Victoria's determination to strike back. While her team worked behind the scenes, Victoria maintained the facade of normalcy. She continued to play the role of the loving wife and the supportive partner. At home, she endured Adrian's saccharine affection, the hollow kisses, and the counterfeit concern. At work, she exchanged professional pleasantries with Claire, resisting the urge to unleash her fury. It was an excruciating performance, but she knew the value of timing. The perfect moment to expose their duplicity had yet to arrive. Behind the scenes, Victoria also fortified her own position. She restructured Hale Innovations in ways that would leave Claire exposed and powerless when the inevitable storm hit. Subtle policy changes, quiet reassignments of authority, and key personnel shifts ensured that Claire's influence within the company dwindled without raising suspicion. Victoria's trusted legal team revised her personal financial arrangements, safeguarding her assets from any potential fallout. She wasn't just planning to confront her betrayers, she was preparing for a war. When the groundwork was complete, Victoria began orchestrating the final act of her counterstrike. She scheduled a comprehensive corporate audit under the guise of routine compliance. In truth, it was a trap. The audit team, hand-picked for their discretion and expertise, was armed with the evidence she'd gathered. Their task was simple: expose Claire's embezzlement and Adrian's complicity in a way that left no room for denial. But Victoria wasn't content to stop at professional ruin. She knew Adrian's conservative family held integrity above all else. She arranged for the evidence of his affair with Claire to be delivered anonymously to his parents, ensuring the fallout would extend beyond the boardroom. As the pieces of her plan aligned, Victoria felt a fierce sense of clarity. Adrian and Claire thought they had orchestrated her downfall, but they were wrong. They had merely set the stage for their own destruction. The reckoning was near. The day of reckoning arrived with an air of suspense, as though the universe itself knew that the balance of power was about to shift. Victoria Hale entered the conference room with her trademark composure, her tailored suit as sharp as the focus in her eyes. The company-wide meeting she had called under the pretext of a performance review had attracted every key player in Hale Innovations, including Claire. Adrian, too, had conveniently invited himself, his presence masking the deeper role he played in the drama about to unfold. Victoria began the meeting in a tone of calm professionalism, outlining the importance of transparency and accountability within their company. But as her words built toward their crescendo, the atmosphere in the room began to change. She pulled up a presentation on the massive screen behind her, an innocuous opening slide showing the company's logo and tagline. "Today," she announced, her voice steady but charged with intent, "we'll be discussing integrity, both as a value and as a practice." With a click, the screen changed, displaying the first piece of evidence, a flowchart detailing the siphoning of funds through shell corporations. The room fell silent. Victoria methodically outlined each transaction, tracing the stolen money back to the accounts Claire and Adrian had so carefully hidden. Claire's face drained of color, and her mouth opened slightly as if to protest, but Victoria continued before she could utter a word. "These discrepancies were uncovered during our recent audit," Victoria said, her gaze locking onto Claire. "What's most shocking is that the trail leads directly to someone we trusted, someone in this very room." Gasps rippled through the audience. Claire stammered, I don't know what you're... Don't," Victoria interrupted, her voice cutting through Claire's denial like a blade. She clicked again, bringing up damning emails and text messages between Claire and Adrian, their affair laid bare for all to see. Adrian, who had been silent until now, stood abruptly. "This is a personal attack," he said, his voice shaking. "You're twisting things to make us look guilty." Victoria turned her attention to him with a steely gaze. "Adrian, you taught me to always trust my instincts. Unfortunately for you, I did." Another click brought up surveillance footage of Adrian meeting with Claire and another woman at a hotel. "This isn't just a betrayal of our marriage," she said coldly. "It's a betrayal of this company and everything I've worked to build." As the evidence continued to pile up, Claire's denials turned to tears, and Adrian's defiance dissolved into stunned silence. The board members, now murmuring angrily among themselves, called for immediate action. Security was summoned to escort Claire from the premises. Adrian, too, left hurriedly, his phone buzzing incessantly, likely with calls from his family, who by now had received the incriminating evidence Victoria had sent them. The meeting ended in chaos, but Victoria remained composed. She stood tall, watching the doors close behind Claire and Adrian. They had underestimated her, and now they were paying the price. That evening, Victoria returned to her penthouse, a bittersweet sense of satisfaction settling over her. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window, staring out at the glittering city she had fought so hard to conquer. Her empire was intact, her betrayers vanquished. Yet, as she watched the lights fade into the horizon, she felt the weight of scars that would never fully heal. The reckoning was over, but the shadows of betrayal would linger forever.